Maria mentioned, my name is Boris Petukhov. I did come to Australia as a migrant quite a few years ago, 28 years ago to be precise. And since then, I did play different roles, generally in IT and delivering various solutions to help businesses become more profitable, become compliant with regulations, from government and other bodies. I guess significantly, in the context of the audience and topics, at some stage in my life, I worked with a company called Horwath's Accounting, and where we developed end-to-end lending management system for automotive loans, right? And how those loans get through the process of applications and being approved, and payments managed and repossessions if required and whatnot. And I also did, as Maria mentioned, quite a few other project deliveries, right? And I always was thinking that when as a delivery manager in ICT space or in finance, we normally a project, what happens, project gets some funding from their sponsors to deliver a CRM, for example, right? But then project go and sort of does things when they need to manage this particular initiative end to end, which cost a few $millions on average, right? Sometimes more. What I notice very often, we don't really use the latest achievements, which provided by science and technology to achieve the final outcome. And I thought maybe as a project manager, I could go in and do some research and help those my colleagues, right, to deliver things to their satisfaction using the technology and science which is available. So out of that, we pretty much did a PhD project with Victoria University here between 2014 and 21, where I worked with my supervisors, and we really said we want to optimize operational management. What we do is when we manage resources, or we manage financials or whatnot, right? And we completed that particular project, right? So interestingly, we did run one of the case studies. So yeah, this slide here, we can see, naming supervisors, and as a result of this project progressing, we created what we call Argo operational management optimization. We registered a patent, right? And we got ourselves pretty much on a couple of sort of both state and federal government panels to provide services and help them with their objectives, right? So and we said, okay, so what does this method give us, right? And we said it gives us opportunity to have valid plans, current plans, and optimized plans and schedules. And this is really more focusing on management as such, project management, right? But then we're basically saying that by applying our techniques and the know-how, we can achieve up 10% savings in operational costs, depending what we do there and how we apply it, right? So in this slide here, we show how we run some case studies, right? To see if the method works or not. So one of the case studies here is professional services, and it's really working with an accounting firm where for the whole year, we introduced some of the components of our methods, right? And as they were introduced to streamline the managerial processes in tax and compliance unit of or a given accounting firm here in Melbourne, at the end of that one financial year where these components were applied, the result was that the organization reduced their write-offs by 9.6%. So you can project it in organizations that run accounting and reporting, and if you know what the revenue is, right, you can pretty much imagine what's 9.6% 50% of that is, and that's without any additional investment, without creating additional revenue, right, and achieving some sales outcome and whatnot. It's simply, this is what I have, and this is how much it normally costs me to deliver, and they were pretty much almost 10% less than that, right? So a few other were run in telecommunications, in IT, building and constructions, and also another area in telecommunications to do with networking, right? So this is where, describing this case study, how we worked with this company, Matthew Steers Accountants and Advisors, and how we basically achieved reductions of the write-off, right? And we also reduce the average job handling time in that organization as well in that period. So as we pretty much complete the project, we also thought, what else can we do apart of just streamlining the processes of management, human management, IT resources management, transport management, and whatnot. And because we were already quite close with accounting profession and problems and issues that this particular sector is experiencing, we said, how about we try and apply our method to help to reduce tax liability, right? So this is where a kind of, another branch of our Argo AI was born, and we call it tax management optimization. So this service supports accountants and business advisors identifying optimal income and expenditure allocations to pretty much minimize the total taxation liability. So, and this is where, accountants or advisors can pretty much apply this to help them, right? So primarily targeting accountants, and once the analysis is provided, they can choose what they want, right? I'm going to show a little bit of that later, but for the purposes of this slide, what we're saying, we're taking an input for a particular tax and compliance job, for example, a group of companies like, say, trusts or Pty Ltd or individuals, right? And we're saying across this group of entities, what was the income, what was the expenditure, and whatnot, and then we put it in the machine. We can call it a black box, right, with artificial intelligence. So that machine does some processing, and it proposes more than one. It can be 10 or it can be 100, depends on the circumstance, solution, which is basically a report for taxation purposes, right? And it's showing, for each entity, this was your income, this is what was your expenditure, and this is the expected tax liability. So each of these proposed solution is valid, and it's in line with the regulation and whatnot, but then end user can actually choose what they actually want for this particular year report, right? So this is what we're using combinatorial analysis, right, to see what can be, what report can be better or worse, and we basically produce up to 100 of such variations. So if you can imagine in a standard scenario where an accountant is given a job, right? They have, a week or two to get the data ready, to do some analysis, apply their knowledge, crunch some numbers, and produce one valid solution being your tax reports that you want to submit to ATO as a company report or individual tax report. This is where they stop. This particular capability allows us to see up to 100 different variations of that valid and compliant solutions, right? And this is communicated to end users in Excel, and they can see, across different, what we call dimensions in data science, different qualities, right? You can pay less tax, or you can show more expenses or more tax if you want to show some profitability because you want to sell this company in the near future or something like that. So it's all in the end user hands. What end solution, what end result is going to be applied and reported to the regulator. So in terms of process flow, we're basically taking inputs. What are the entities? What were the transactions in reporting period? What are the allocation constraints? Because we know that some of the expenses can be allocated to some categories and some not. So all of these things will come in, and also including the tax rates. So this is where Argo AI tax management optimization machine, it will apply genetic algorithms, right, to create those many combinations, right, and see which one is more optimal and which one is not. So the output is produced in Excel format, where 100 ranked liabilities outcomes, ultimately reports, are presented, right? And we can also see the underlying transaction allocations for each of the proposed solution. So once the input is from account on this scenario, we are getting all the transactions, transaction categories, and accounting entities, as well as tax rates for a particular financial year. So, and then they confirm, these are the types of entities and their tax rates, how the transactions relate to incomes, right? How transactions, relate to liabilities, what are the sections in the profit and loss statement they are going to see, relationship between transaction categories, profit and loss statement sections. So we know we have different categories, how they're going to land in particular section in the profit and loss statement. Then we are confirming the mapping between transaction types and entity types, like what is applicable and what not to which entity. Yeah. So, and then the tax management optimization unit will construct those combinations that we discussed before, right? They will calculate tax liability for each of these combinations, right? They will rank those in order to see which tax liability is higher or smaller, lower. And then it will output the results in Excel spreadsheet with 100 of these solutions. So, under the hood, we basically get all the input. We apply genetic algorithms. I'm not sure if you're not aware, genetic algorithm is a method which really helps to search particular problem domain and come with outcomes in relatively effective fashion, right? And ultimately, it's method to optimize things in a lame, personal language. It's to optimize. You have something which is quite good. You want to take it to another level and you optimize, and this is where you do genetic algorithms, right? The name this particular technology got from a Darwin-like natural selection, which we're all aware, applicable to biological evolution of various species, where the stronger species survive and give their qualities to the following generations. So in a similar fashion, genetic algorithms work. So again, this combinatorial analysis is basically applied to construct various solutions. We're just providing an example here. If you need to construct a total of $5, how would you use $2, $1 coins to come up with what you need at the end, right? How many combinations in a chess game can be played, and which one is better and which one is not so good. So in this particular scenario, we apply this optimization to minimize tax liability. Yeah, that's the ultimate objective function. So this is kind of, an example. So we have a group of entities that need to produce a report. And these are two discretionary trusts, one private company, and one individual taxpayer. So we have 4 altogether, right? So this is where we produce different different scenarios. So all of these scenarios, each of them is pretty much a statement which is ready to be communicated to the authority, and we just split. This is our entity 1, discretionary trust 1, discretionary trust 2, and their income and their tax, income and tax, and then we have a company Pty Ltd and their income and their tax payable, and then the last is individual tax here, income and tax. So we can see how amongst 4 entities, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? Those few solutions, we don't see all of them, but we have 100. We can see 20 or 30 here on this page, and each of them pretty much had the same total amount of incomes, right? But you can see how taxation is really different between 20,000 and 14,000, or even 13,000, right, is the smallest, and 20,000 is the highest. So by just reallocating different transactions to different entities, we end up with a total liability for the whole group that much different. So normally, if you give this job to a human being, chances are they're going to produce one output, and it's going to be somewhere in the middle, maybe 19, maybe 14, or worst case scenario 20. And it's going to be valid because they won't have enough capacity to entertain many options, right? So this is how one of the selected reports looks. So we have now, this is what we're ultimately submitting, right, as a tax report, and we can see these 4 entities here, and across the, the report, we can see different categories, right, and the values here. So again, all of them are the same input, but different distribution in terms of, payable tax, and obviously they're different from other things. So, this capability we developed because we want to show and we want to help, people who do this accounting and reporting on a daily basis. We want to help them to do their job better, and, charge client for a good value for money. So we're happy to help if and when and if people are interested, just get in touch, and we'll take next steps. So that's pretty much what I wanted to present. Happy to take questions. So related to any pages of the presentation or anything related to that outside of this presentation.
Boris, I will be watching the chat, so if any questions arise, I will let you know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So don't let me.
I don't really see any questions. I've got a question. So have you actually tested on like real businesses? Do you have like real businesses coming to you so that you can run this? I think you mentioned that things.
Yeah. So as we were progressing with this development and case study, we did get a limited set from an entity, and really we used it to develop that. This product hasn't been really used that widely, that we acknowledge, right? But it's available, and in terms of commercial engagement, as Argo is registered on different forums, it's got professional indemnity, public liability. We have privacy, policies in place. So all of that is followed. So shouldn't be an issue. If people are curious, they can and want to give it a go, then we can talk to them and make sure we meet all the requirements, and if there are concerns, we'll address those concerns, right? And the good thing is that whatever machine produces, right, it's not something that gets submitted to ATA tomorrow, right? The accountant in question will have a look at it, and they may even compare it with something that they wanted to to generate and produce and be ready for submission. And it's only when they are, happy with something, it's their call to utilize it or not, and where it goes, right?
Do you provide trial access, or like
you have
to with the client to set up the system, or is it supposed that the clients can have some independence when they come to the platform to set up their system there? So how do you connect? What should be on the client side? If we refer to, for example, some big products as SAP, so you mentioned the input, all right? So how is your input looks like?
Yeah, it's basically Excel, right? So we currently, the way it works, we communicate Excels. We have a conversation via Zoom, right? And then accountant extracts data, saves it as Excel, and communicates to us, right? So this is where is it? So this is input, right? So we need in Excel, what are the entities, what are the transactions, what are the allocation constraints, what can be allocated to what, and tax rates. So once this Excel is communicated to us, then we do the magic and we can see the outcome.
I apologize for interrupting. So you have 4 points for input. So each of the points needs to be a separate Excel document?
Correct, yes. A page in Excel document, yes.
And then, so they provide them to you, and then you do your magic, right?
Correct.
So there is like at this stage, like you're exploring only the opportunity for clients to be able to access the platform and do their allocation themselves, right?
So yeah, at this point in time, the platform is kind of its internal platform. They need to communicate with us via Zoom meeting and an Excel document and email. So this comes in, right? And this comes out. So we send an Excel file with 100 solutions, right? And details of how the transactions were allocated, right? And then they choose which ones they actually want. Yeah.
And you, I think you provided your details. So if people want to reach and have a discussion with you regarding what can be done for the
yes, of course. So this is where they can use this email address, right? Or this phone number to get in touch with us.
So we're going to put those slides as part of our meetup page, so that can be visible to people and they can approach that. And probably if you can put that as a comment on the meetup, this is where it will be easier to locate you. I would just want probably one more question. Which businesses do you think are going to benefit more from your solution?
I think financial planning and accountants who do taxes. Admittedly, it would be kind of mid complexity taxation jobs, right? Not necessarily a single entity or one individual, but it's when a group of entities are client of a particular accountant and they have a couple of trusts or even more than one PTO Ltd. A few individuals. So this would definitely benefit from something like that, because as we know, human capacity is only that big, right? And I know from my experience, I do, as I mentioned earlier, we do scheduling for IT projects. So again, normally a project will have one schedule, and I have a human being who is trying to compile that schedule, keep it current. And if I ask them, can you produce me 100 schedules to see if they're different by 2 or 3%, they're not going to do it. They're going to say, Boris, you're kidding. I'm already working on this one, full time. The same story comes here, right? A particular individual, no matter how experienced, dedicated, smart they are, it's just a human being. So they will produce maybe 1, maybe 2, right? 3 maximum. Machine will do 100, right? And then a human being can select for a particular scenario what's a preferred one to go forward with. So yeah, that's a benefit, right? That's a value.
That's great. Excuse me to interrogate here, but yeah, just like 2 more questions. So one question about security, you mentioned this, right? Because that may be a concern for businesses. So what sort of security you have in place to ensure that information they provide to you will be secure and with privacy concerns, because it's public, it's not public information, it's internal.
Oh, absolutely, right. So, you know, first of all, even when we receive information, we don't need to get, you know, personal sensitive information, right? We are only talking financial transactions, right? That's, you know, first kind of word of precaution, right? So we really want to see those, you know, categories and transaction types and whatnot. But within our infrastructure, we have all the process, which is, you know, we won't allow anyone to get out, right? So we have normal stack of infrastructures, you know, supported by multi-factor authentications, by passwords, by enforcement of those things. You know, current capability is not even available on the internet. Nobody can actually hack into it. So we received it via email, via, you know, standard Windows Outlook features, which is, you know, everyone is using for all intents and purposes. All our staff is really undergone training, right, and in security policies, in managing commercially sensitive information. They all subject to those to be followed, right? And as we communicated back, it just goes into the accountant's inbox from our inbox. So there's very little area to really get exposure to public, for example, right, or something like that.
Thank you.
I also want to mention that Argo as an entity, because we are registered with a number of not just commercial organizations and work for them like banks or, you know, universities and whatnot, because they are registered with Victoria e-Services Panel, Victorian Government e-Services Panel, and also federal government so-called marketplace, where they do all the assessments. They do professional indemnity, public liability insurances, all your policies, you know, who works for you, do they have, do they need to follow rules and whatnot. So all of that is covered. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just watching the chat and not seeing anything. That was a very exhausting discussion. So we covered everything. Yeah, so just put your information on the Meetup page, and I'm also going to publish the recording which I'm doing. And if you, I think I have your slides, so I'm going to upload them to the Meetup page as well, so people can reach it.
Okay.
For you. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your insightful presentation. It looks like absolutely fantastic platform, digging into text and actually applying those data science techniques to a very practical and very close to all businesses dilemma of how to move steps. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, guys.
So we're closing our meeting. And if you have questions, please reach out. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.